Welcome to Scrambled, your space for fertility, owning your 30s, and the scramble that makes it all worth it. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today, we have a very special guest, Amanda Segal. Amanda joined Shady Grove Fertility back in 1991, which has since become the largest fertility practice in the country. She played a pivotal role in marketing a financial program tailored for patients seeking IVF treatment. In 2008, Amanda spearheaded the creation of an international egg donation program, enabling patients from all over the world to seek treatment in the United States. Drawing from her own experience of needing fertility to conceive her 3 children, Amanda provided comfort and valuable information to prospective patients. So we are very excited to have you here today. Thanks for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. This is truly an honor, and I have definitely gotten into Scrambled and am loving what you guys are doing. So huge congrats to both of you. As you'll hear, I am very passionate about this topic, and I just love the fact that there are 2 young girls that are out there talking about it, and that's what we need to see.
They're really nice words as well, because we need the encouragement, because it's been an interesting learning curve for us, but we're actually having a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun.
And you know what? That's ultimately what you need to do. You need to make it fun, because it is a sensitive topic. And I think it is something that is just not mainstream yet. We're getting there. We're definitely getting there, but it's not mainstream. So when, somebody can hop on and get to see, 2 young girls, one that's been through the process, one that's in the field, that can really give you that it's okay, is fantastic. So huge kudos to both of you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thanks. And it's full circle too, and a little kismet for us, because Amanda's from Maryland. I'm from Maryland. We know each other. And at first, when I was diagnosed with low AMH, I mean, you were one of the first people I spoke to, and you kind of walked me through that and comforted me. And it's just full circle that now we're here.
Can you talk a little bit more about, you've got a very impressive resume. As Alyssa said in the intro about you, Amanda, you've had 30 years of experience in the field. Can you talk more about that 30 years? What got you into the industry? What your roles have been in the fertility space? Just talk to us about your experience.
So I moved to the States back in late 1991, and at the time, my now ex-brother-in-law had started a fertility practice, and he said to me, "You'll come work for me." And I was like, okay, knew nothing, and really started as a front desk receptionist. I was 22 years old. One of my colleagues at the time, who's now one of my closest friends, always teases me and says how I would walk in with my little leather mini skirt and would kind of command the front desk. Shady Grove Fertility back then was literally 1 location and 2 physicians, to where we are today, one of the largest fertility practices in the country. And you know what? I just grew. I moved from, front desk to ultimately going into billing, and worked on the billing side for some time, and was really very much present when we launched our shared risk money back refund program, which was at the time really specific to Shady Grove Fertility, where we gave patients the opportunity to do IVF with the understanding that if you were not successful, you could get your money back. And that has grown over these 30 years to now, and we'll talk about it from a financial perspective of egg freezing. But yeah, kind of just grew and dabbled in a little bit of everything. Was always kind of on the marketing and backside of the office. But, I tease and I say I probably could do everything at Shady Grove except for an egg retrieval. And then, over time, about 5 years into being there, was trying to get pregnant. I had got married young, so I didn't want to start my family early. We had immigrated, so, we were kind of going through that. And about 5 years in, started trying, and we couldn't get pregnant. I remember walking into the office one day and saying, "Do you know a good reproductive endocrinologist? I think I need one." And they said, "Well, here we are." Our diagnosis turned out to be male factor infertility, which again is another topic so many people don't talk about. About 50% of couples actually go through fertility fertility treatment purely with male factor. And we really, and again, this is 30 plus years ago. So back then, statistics were so vastly different, and we really needed to go straight into IVF. We couldn't even do any of the inseminations. We needed to IVF with ICSI. And Michael Tucker, who was an Englishman, who was the first physician in the US to create an ICSI baby, had just joined Shady Grove Fertility. And it was kind of meant to be. We did have an unsuccessful cycle. Our first cycle, we didn't get any fertilization. We then went on to being successful. I have 29-year-old twins. And then working there, decided about 6 years later that I wasn't done. My family wasn't complete. I always knew I wanted one more child. And my husband was like, we have a boy and a girl. What do we want to do this again? And I work for a damn fertility clinic. I'm doing this again. And did go through IVF. Again, my embryos that I'd had from back then weren't any good, and went through it again. And I have my now 22-year-old. So my experience, was able to afford me that ability to really share that with my patients. And I loved that. I loved being able to say, I've been down this road. I know. So, that if there's one bit of advice that I can say is use your voices. Don't be afraid to, because you'd be surprised, as I'm sure you found, Alyssa, as you've been through the process. You've been a voice to so many friends that have potentially needed to go through this process. And if we all start talking about it enough, it will become mainstream.
A lot of the questions we've been getting, I mean, obviously we've had medical professionals on the episodes, we've had personal experiences, but the quote unquote mundane stuff, costs, benefits through work, certain work covers, others don't. Can you dive a little bit into that? I mean, I know for me, like, I got lucky, insurance covered a lot of mine, but my work, for example, does not have fertility benefits at all.
Great question. And I think that is probably one of the most daunting aspects of this, because for most girls in their 30s, they're not sitting with a bank account of, $50,000 that they're waiting to use. So it can be incredibly intimidating in saying, okay, I really want to do this, but how do I afford it? So there are tons of options. And whether it be, yes, some folks do have insurance benefits, it is far more limited. And that is because for a long time, egg freezing for social reasons were deemed experimental. They kind of weren't really, well, why do you need to? Yeah, for oncology, I can understand. Those are women that are going to go through chemotherapy, and insurance would pay, or there would be special funds that, or grants that people would be able to get for that. But for egg freezing, it became something that was social. You were doing it because you kind of wanted that insurance policy. So why should insurance cover it? But more and more companies were recognizing, hang on a second, we don't want to lose our staff. We don't want to lose our employees to going off and having babies and then going on maternity leave and then potentially not even coming back. Versus, well, maybe if we offered them some kind of coverage to cover this preservation of fertility, they'll stay. They'll stay and they'll continue working and they won't, rush off. And that became huge. So one of the most beneficial policies out there that I've seen is Carrot. Carrot Fertility is an addendum employers will offer. So I think insurances are starting to get there. I'm definitely seeing a trend where, there's a maximum limit. Maybe they'll offer you $15,000 or $20,000, but at least there's something to kind of move the ball forward. So ask those questions, work with your financial coordinator. That's why clinics have them, to be able to guide you. They are there to serve you, and you should absolutely utilize their resources. Okay, what does it include and what doesn't it include? So typically you'll find the exclusions are the medication. Medication is definitely a huge exclusion. And not to frighten folks, but it can get expensive. And it does a lot of the time kind of boil down to age and diagnosis. So for a younger girl, they're going to be using less medication, but that's assuming that their AMHs and FSHs are good. If you're needing more medication to stimulate your ovaries, then that's going to obviously increase the cost. So from a medication perspective, I usually estimate around $3,500 to $7,000. That's pretty much what you're looking at. I've never really seen anyone spend more than $7,000. That's probably high end for egg freezing, but there are very few that are at about $3,500. So I would probably say $5,000 would be what you can estimate that you're looking at from that perspective. Anesthesia cost is just pertains to your clinic. So each anesthesiologist, but that probably is anywhere from around $700 to $1,200. Again, depending on where you're doing it. And then very important, now you've frozen those eggs. Okay, well, they have to be cryopreserved. And most clinics don't include that in the cost. So you're looking at that being typically a monthly. So typically the egg freezing, that first month you get your eggs frozen and there's no cost there. Subsequently, you're pretty much paying about $80 a month each month. Around there, I would again say anywhere between $50 to $100. It just depends on where they're being stored and what the clinic is charging. If you're doing multiple cycles, so that's another important factor. So the pricing that we've just given you is just for one cycle. If you do have to do more than one cycle, each cycle is going to cost you that, $9,000, that $5,000 for your medication. And then your cryopreservation is on each lot and most clinics kind of cap that at about $120 a month. What some clinics have offered, and again, my experience is through Shady Grove Fertility, which is under the U.S. Fertility Network. There is a huge network in the United States that is under that umbrella. So it doesn't only have to be a U.S. Fertility, as Ashley's familiar. RMA New York is part of that U.S. Fertility. There are clinics out in Chicago. There are clinics on the West Coast. There are clinics in South Carolina. Ovation Fertility is underneath them. Fertility Centers of Illinois is underneath them. Reproductive Science Centers in San Francisco and the Bay Area are under them. So there is a huge network. And what they offer, which I think is phenomenal, is an assured program. Most women going through the process is under the assumption, I'll do one cycle, I'll freeze my eggs and I'll be fine. Well, unless your physician is really kind of going through the nitty-gritty of it, there is a number of eggs that you want to see that ultimately is going to give you a benefit at the end of the day. So if you land up with 5 eggs in one cycle, the chances of you really coming out with a baby are lower than if you had 20 eggs. So what we looked at, and of course, Ashley, if I'm saying anything that's changed or whatever, please correct me. Again, this is knowledge just from what my experience over the years. But typically for women under 35, we want to see about 20 eggs frozen. For women 35 to 40, about 30 eggs. And that would give you at least 2 to 3 potential children. So you have to remember that not every egg is going to go to blastocyst. Not every blastocyst is going to fertilize. Not every fertilization is going to be an embryo. Not every embryo is going to implant, and not every implantation is going to create a baby. And that's a misconception that a lot of people aren't familiar with.
Yeah, I think a lot of REIs are getting a lot better if they don't already have those conversations around in your initial conversation, whether you're an egg freezer or an IVF patient, asking you, what are your family planning goals? What are your desired number of children? And then talking to you about what that looks like statistically in terms of how many eggs we might want to see based on your age, your AFC and your AMH. And then they kind of can give you a little bit of a ballpark in terms of how many cycles it might take to realistically achieve those family planning goals.
I mean, that's such an important part of that. So with that, the next daunting part of the process is, oh my gosh, if I have to do, what does this mean? I mean, I don't know how many eggs I'm going to get. So what was created, and it kind of was a spin-off from the money back refund program with the shared risk option that Shady Grove and then US Fertility adopted in kind of giving folks that financial safety net to fall into if they weren't successful. What we did with egg freezing is say, we believe that women under 35 should get the required number of eggs within about 4 cycles. Some women can get them on their first cycle. There can be a 4-year-old that produces 20 eggs on her first cycle. They're all great quality, and you're good to go. Versus the next person who may have to do 2 or 3 or even 4. So what they did was they created a capped fee, the ability to do up to 4 cycles for a flat fee. And the fee for the Assured 20 program is $13,600. So you're paying a premium if you get all 20 eggs in that first cycle. If you have to end up doing 2 cycles, you're actually coming out better off. And obviously, if you're doing 3 or 4 cycles, you're doing even better. Now, with the first cycle, if you do end up getting all your eggs on the first cycle, I do believe that there's a $3,000 refund. So you do get $3,000 back if you end up getting all 20 eggs. So there's nothing to lose. You really have nothing to lose. Obviously, your medication is additional each time you're doing it. The fees that we went through on the exclusions are still additional. That you'd have to pay, but at least that the majority of that fee in the IVF or the IV process, because we're not fertilizing, but the retrieval of the eggs is covered under that. For women that are older or potentially have a worse AMH and therefore we know are going to need more than 20 eggs, the program that's offered is an Assure 30, where you're getting up to 30 eggs. The fee for that cycle is $19,600. Same concept. You do your first cycle, you get an $8,000 refund if you get 30 mature eggs on your first try. You get a $3,000 refunds if you end up doing 2 cycles. And then obviously 3 and 4 are part of the fee, and you're not paying any extra. So, a fantastic financial option for those folks that don't have any insurance coverage, for those folks that don't have something like Carrot, a supplemental policy. And it just gives you the peace of mind as to what you're going to be spending up front.
And like one of the hopes in us trying to raise awareness around fertility, we talk a lot about how when you're young, you really take your fertility for granted. And we do want to highlight that for some people, maybe it's something to become aware of when you're a little bit younger, and you can start saving and working your way towards eventually being able to invest in yourself in that way.
Brilliant. Absolutely. And I didn't even think of that. We put money away for a 401k, but maybe put $100 away for this, in your first job. That's what you do. You open up a savings account and you think, okay, well, I'm not going to need it now, but I may need it down the road. And if not, hey, it can go towards a wedding, if you're getting married at 30. And yes, I think young girls, I see it with my girls, people are so much more independent and they don't want to have to feel like they have to ask their parents. So, yes, I actually love that. And I never even thought of it. So I love that you brought that. Yeah.
Well, it's actually recently I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in Australia who's wanting to do egg freezing. And she actually said to me, she goes, I wish 10 years ago I'd thought about this and started putting my money away for it. And then I started to think, well, 10 years ago we were 20. Yeah. Imagine if we had Scrambled or something similar to listen to, and actually think maybe I will start investing in myself in that way and preparing for it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Can we ask, in terms of, like you said, US Fertility offer that amazing financial scheme for patients, how do people find out if the fertility clinic that they've chosen participates in a similar kind of scheme?
It's all about conversation with your financial coordinator. So I know that you guys spoke about this on one of your previous episodes. When you initially start the process, you're going to go in and get your ovarian reserve tested. That's always like the first step. You'll get your ovarian reserve tested, and then you'll come in and you'll meet with your physician, and they'll kind of go over your results with you. If they turn around at that point and say, look, Alyssa, this is time. We need to do this. That next step will be, well, okay, can I be please put in touch with somebody in the financial office so that I'm able to understand what this means moving forward. And any responsible person doing this is going to obviously ask that question.
I mean, you were one of the financial advisors to those poor people. I mean, I'll never forget, I got my first ultrasound. They had just told me things weren't looking good, and she was the first person I spoke to. And I was just like, I can't do this. And I just like broke down, and she was just like, I'm so sorry. Here are the costs. I mean, I'll never forget. I was sitting in a room with her and I was like, I'm going to punch you in the face right now.
You're so emotional, and you're about to go through all these hormones that are going to make you even more emotional. But remember, they're speaking to so many people that it almost becomes immune to them versus you, who this is the first time you're hearing this. Again, it's just a way of how you come across and say, look, I understand that this is what I need to do. I just need some kind of empathy and how am I going to figure this bit out? And I'll be honest with you, all my years that I was in the infertility, that was my worst job.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to have these conversations, even though some of the numbers that we're throwing around are really confronting. I think it's probably the biggest barrier to accessing fertility care is the finance behind it. And it varies from country to country and clinic to clinic. And I just think it's important to have these conversations so that people know how to be financially literate or who to talk to or how to find out, because it's probably the most confronting part of everything once you've found out your results and digested all of that. The finance part is big, and it's probably the thing we get the most questions about, I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because you might even come out of your consultation and have really good results. And you might still be thinking, I'm going to freeze anyway because I'm single or this, or maybe there's male infertility. But then you hear the cost and people are like, nope. So
Yeah.
it's just, even if you have good numbers, it's stuff to think about all around. Like, you don't know about the other partner. You don't know how things are going to go.
Down the road, absolutely. And if you have those young eggs, to be able to at least have one part of the puzzle that is in a good place, then the rest doesn't matter. And look, that was me. I was young when I went through. I mean, I was 26 when I went through my IVF, and thank God. And I also had PCOS, so there was even a side of me that we had to deal with. But because I was younger, obviously my success rates ultimately helped in the outcome.
I think it's interesting too, though. I'm hearing more from young women, especially in America, where you can sometimes get benefits through your employer, who will look for employment based off of the fertility benefits that they provide.
I hear this all the time now. Many people I know are doing that. My sister was recently looking for a new job, and like that was definitely something that I was like, put this on your radar. I have a friend, she's starting freezing in a week on the 16th or 17th, and her whole first round is covered. Everything's covered except for storage. I mean, her work covers it. It's amazing.
Which I think this is good. The more these conversations are out there, hopefully the more employers that get on board with actually including fertility benefits as a part of their benefit package.
One thing that just actually kind of popped into my mind, and I do want to mention it because it doesn't get spoken about enough. I know you spoke about it on one of the previous podcasts, but I do want to reiterate because I think it's so important. And I did just have an experience of somebody that did the opposite, and I was so upset that she never came to speak to me about it first. We talk about egg freezing. You may be in a relationship with somebody and you're not ready to get married, or you maybe not ready to have a child, but you're in a relationship with somebody. A lot of questions that women say is, well, should I freeze my eggs or should I freeze my embryos? Ultimately, freezing embryos, yes, does give you a better chance of success because you know what the embryo looks like. So you know that you have a blastocyst. You know that you have embryos that are of good quality. With eggs, you still have to fertilize that egg with that sperm, which will then, as I explained, create the blastocyst, which will create the fertilization blastocyst, etc. I am a huge, huge, huge proponent for freezing eggs before embryos, because you never know unless you are in a committed, and I hate to say married relationship, but I do actually believe that, because it is too easy for a guy to walk out of a relationship that is not committed with a legal document. That is one bit of advice that I really want to reiterate, in that freeze eggs rather than embryos, because you really don't know. Or if you are married but you're not ready to have do both. Take half of the eggs and freeze them, and half of them create embryos.
I was gonna say, I have a friend who has the BRCA gene, and she is married. That's exactly what she did.
Yeah,
she did half eggs, half embryos.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love hearing that, because honestly, that's what you should be. You don't know what's going to happen down. You don't know.
I think people don't realize that when you create an embryo with, say, an intimate partner or a partner, there is dual custody over that embryo. And I've seen, unfortunately, legalities occur when a relationship breakdown occurs, and you see them fighting for embryos in court, the same as if it were a living child. So it's very tricky.
And I just had it, and it was honestly, it was devastating for me to watch. But she figured they were planning on a wedding that summer, and that she wanted to do another cycle, but she said, all right, let me at least fertilize the eggs that I have. And I wanted to just cry at the thought of it. And then the relationship did end. And, she had to literally, and then it was getting him to sign to dispose of the embryos because those embryos are redundant. I mean, they really aren't worth anything. So I don't want to sound like the voice of doom, but I have to sound the voice of doom because I think that is something that people just don't think about. And even your physician, they're going to listen to, they are there to guide you, but technically it is ultimately your choice. They can't say to you, absolutely not, I'm not going to fertilize those eggs. If you want embryos, you want embryos. So, I do feel you can't put them in the responsibility of making that decision for you.
100%. My personal experience actually is that when I got tested for just to find out what my fertility was at that point, my husband and I had been married for maybe 2.5 years. And we ultimately did embryo banking based off of the fact that I do have a low AMH. So our doctor was very keen to try and produce an embryo as soon as possible. So we did an embryo banking cycle, but I did ask, I said, could I do an egg freezing cycle? And he said, look, I support that as well. The fact that you're married and whatever, I feel more comfortable to get you embryo banking to start with, but that is something that you can totally look at. And I actually ended up telling Alyssa I did chat to a different physician at my job who was very much trying to get me to do just eggs. So ultimately it does come down to yourself and how you feel. And
when that commitment is there, I would absolutely agree. I would say exactly what both physicians said.
Yeah, but it was 100% something I asked because I unfortunately have seen both sides of it, and I've seen the difficulties that arise when people have embryos together and then there is a relationship breakdown. It's a really, really tricky thing to navigate. So I think that's a really, really good thing to bring up because I don't know if people realize what happens.
I think I knew that, but I'm not sure. And you both saying this right now, I am just like, wow, I didn't realize you have equal custody over the embryo as if it's a living child.
You actually have
People
to
are
make
going
a
to court
few.
for it.
Yeah, you have to make a few decisions when you're creating an embryo together. You also need to decide what happens in the event of someone's death, what happens in the event of a divorce. So there's a lot of things involved.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, a big one in the news. I think it was it Sofia Vergara? I think she was one of the big, or one of the actresses. I know that they went to court on it, and I mean, I just hear this and I just cringe because I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is someone's fertility that you're talking about. It's not just a painting on a wall that you're fighting over.
And I think you do see it a little bit in women that maybe are sort of above the age of about 30, 32, 33, that maybe are in what they consider to be a committed relationship, but they're starting to get nervous around their age and their egg quality. And they do jump in quite quickly to embryo banking because that feels like the right thing to do. But I think physicians are getting a little bit better at having those conversations and making people realize, look, there is joint ownership over embryos. Because a lot of people say to me, is there a difference between the cost of IVF and egg freezing? And the answer is yes, there's a big difference between the cost of an IVF cycle and an egg freezing cycle. And I kind of always explain that up until your retrieval date, everything's the same. But once those eggs are taken out for someone who wants to create an embryo, there's a whole other world.
I never even thought about that.
And that all costs money as well.
Well, but if you have to go through IVF, if you're trying and can't get pregnant, I know most insurances will cover 3 full rounds of IVF,
it
right?
Depends, yeah. So there's that as well. It's just good, I think, for women to be aware that, yes, you have the cost of egg freezing.
There is a cost.
But should you need to use those eggs in the future, there will be an additional cost associated with it.
And then hopefully you have a partner that is going to help pay for it. So at least you're not completely on your own. So so that at least there's a dual income at that point if you are in a relationship.
Yeah, I think it's just good for everyone to be aware what the costs will look like. The journey is not always, stop, start. Obviously, you have a continuous storage fee even after you've done the process, which is significantly less, obviously, than the actual process itself. But that's something to bear in mind is how long are you going to be paying a storage fee? At what point do you decide to stop paying your storage fee? Have you eventually met your family planning goals, maybe without even having to use the eggs? So there are many factors involved financially. I think we're probably going to end up doing more episodes on finances because it does vary from country to country. We have people listening from Australia, and that's
a whole
other thing as well. So yeah, I even actually recently had a girlfriend, and I won't share too much of her experience, but she did it in the UK. And it was interesting when she sent me the breakdown of costs that she received from her clinic. how they broke it down. They actually separately charge for things like ICSI versus conventional insemination. So it was very interesting to see the breakdown for her, because obviously my literacy in the knowledge around the finances is more related to the US market. So it's very interesting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Boy, we've covered a lot.
We've covered a lot, and it's
very informative. It's been very informative. I think people will really appreciate this episode. I mean, it's like one of the biggest parts of
It is one of the
thing.
biggest, right.
Yeah.
Once you've kind of gotten over the hurdle of recognizing you need this is definitely the next part of it. But, look, I think the process for everybody is different. And I've had, whether it be friends that have done the process, whether it be friends' children who have done the process, everybody handles it. And I remember you going through it at the same time that I had a friend who was in her late 30s going through it, and you had such different experiences. And I was like, here's this young 30-year-old that is just absolutely killing it, and somebody else is struggling.
Totally. We talk a lot about how doing it is an investment in yourself, whether you're doing IVF, whether you're doing egg freezing for preservation. It's an investment in yourself, and I think going into it to try and be in a really good mindset is super important. So even just having this knowledge around the finances, getting all of that sorted before you actually start your cycle and trying to get yourself psychologically prepared and in a good place makes all the difference to your experience.
Yeah.
100%. And I am, again, a huge, I wasn't fortunate enough when I went through to have kind of all the holistic side of what they offer out there. Ultimately, look, this is a medical procedure and we really can't get away from that. But there are opportunities for one to, as you say, invest in yourself by whether it just be to go for the acupuncture, just to relax yourself and kind of, as you say, give yourself that me time when something that can be quite daunting is happening. So I am such a big believer in that as well, is utilize resources that are out there as well from a holistic perspective.
Oh, this has been such a good conversation. We are so appreciative. 30 years of knowledge that you've just shared with us.
I know.
I do miss it, I have to say. I mean, it was my life for so long.
Speak with us anytime.
Invite me back. I would love it. I would love it.